All right. Welcome to El Shaddai Ministries, everyone who is here locally, as well as those who are live streaming. On our website, I just noticed as I look, we now have 70 cities and 7 countries online. One of the things that's quite interesting to me this last Saturday, if you go to our website and you click on the little map with all the red dots, it'll give you a breakdown of where people are coming from. And so after the service Saturday, I go home and I click on that to see how many cities, countries, were coming to our website. And when I looked, there were people in every single state, as well as Washington, D.C., that came to our website Saturday, Shabbat. All 50 states and Washington, D.C. And on top of that, on Shabbat, from around the world, there were 40 countries. And I'm going to just, of course, the United States, but here's the other countries who were at our Shabbat service. Canada, Australia, UK, Sweden, South Africa, Germany, Netherlands, India, New Zealand, Philippines, Ireland, Jamaica, Costa Rica, Korea, Denmark, Ethiopia, Romania, Austria, Barbados, Namibia, Nigeria, Vietnam, Ghana, Bulgaria, Singapore, Israel, Finland, Norway, France, Puerto Rico, Sri Lanka, Mexico, Switzerland, Italy, Croatia, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, Taiwan, and Malaysia. So that's just incredible. And so welcome all those who are here with us from around the world. Let me introduce Mike Cohen here. As I have, we've had a flyer back there, so all of you are probably had the flyer, read the flyer. But I just wanted to mention that he is a veteran IDF Reserve officer in an elite Special Forces unit. He's been active in Israeli-American and Israel diaspora politics and business in a wide variety behind-the-scenes capacities since his teen years. But he's been called to consult on a range of topics for members of both houses of the United States Congress and in the Israeli Knesset. He's addressed the entire alphabet soup of Jewish and Christian organizational life. And he's been doing all kinds of things. And I met Mike in Nashville, Tennessee a couple of years ago at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. And someone just pulled me over and said, hey, you got to meet this guy. And I guess someone said to him, hey, you got to meet this guy. So we met, and I don't know, we had about a 45-minute conversation or something like that. And I believe we really connected. And I was thinking, man, sometime I'd love to have Mike come out here. And I've been talking to him over the phone and emails about different topics. And I'm really excited about what he's going to be talking about tonight, because that basically is our message too. God is talking, and are you listening? So with that, let's give a round of applause to Mike Cohen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're in perilous times, as everybody knows. And I don't like harboring on the negative. So I'm going to try and spend the time we have together focusing on the positive. But to do so, we have to say thank you. There is a Jewish tradition that you may have heard of called Makdimim B'Chavod Achsanya. You begin every discussion by thanking the host, by honoring the host. And I'd like to ask everyone to please say thank you to your host and to our host here, who's above. And there are men and women all over the world today who put themselves in harm's way in order for us to be able to sit here comfortably or sit at home comfortably, wherever we live. There are very few people watching this who live in a place of serious danger. I'm not talking about the danger of crossing a street or the danger of getting hit by a truck or the danger of slipping on ice or getting trampled at a Seattle Mariners game. I'm talking about real danger. And these men and women put themselves on the line so that we can go about our daily business. So in thanking the host, I'd like to ask that we say a prayer together, if that's okay. And traditionally, I ask people to please rise, so if you choose to do so. God on high who dwells in might, and King to whom peace belongs, look down from your heavenly abode and bless the valiant soldiers of the United States Armed Forces who risk their lives to protect the well-being of all your creation. Benevolent God, be their shelter and their stronghold, and let them not falter. Fill their hearts with courage and faith to thwart the wicked schemes of enemies and end the rule of evil. Protect them on land, in the air, and in the sea, and defeat their adversaries. Guide them in peace, lead them towards peace, and return them safely and speedily to their families. As you have written, God will shield you from all harm. He will guard your soul. God will safeguard your going and your coming, now and forevermore. Grant us all true peace in fulfillment of the prophecy. Nation shall not lift up sword against other nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. Let all inhabitants on earth know that the dominion is yours, and your name inspires awe upon all you have created. Amen. Master of the universe, during this period in which we enter into judgment, all your creation, we pray regarding your people, wherever they may be. Hashem, guard and save us from all our enemies and from those who may hate us, who surround us, Israel, on every side, from the borders of the Lebanon and Egypt to the forces in Iraq and in Afghanistan, to the firefighters and the police officers and the border patrolmen and the border guards who know not what they do, and from any enemy lurking, be it in the Holy Land or in this great land, whose plot to spill the blood of innocent souls. Save us from the most recent foe, a bitter and cruel enemy from the land of Persia, who speaks haughtily and disdainfully about your people Israel and about anyone who claims to be your friend, who threatens to annihilate all the inhabitants of the Holy Land, and who diligently prepares weapons to destroy, kill, and obliterate Jews, Christians, and others, as did the wicked Haman in his time. Father in heaven, we rely upon no one other than you, for only your great and exalted hand with kindness and mercy can save us from our enemies. Favor our requests, decree good life and peace for everyone, and sever the hands of the enemies who plot to destroy you. May their weapons be destroyed in the merit of our ancestors who walked before you, and for the sake of your great and holy name by which we are known. As your prophet stated, I will protect this city Jerusalem, to save it, for my sake and for the sake of my servant David. Hashem, in this period of judgment, remember us and our children with kindness and with mercy, for our sake and for the sake of our children forever. Amen. Thank you. I'm going to try and do 3 things today in the short time that we have. I'm going to try and teach a little, I'm going to try and preach a little, and I'm going to try and beseech a little. And hopefully they'll mesh into a cohesive unit. It's all about this. That's the bottom line. This is my son, Natan, who was born 15 weeks ago. Tonight is the first night. You hear that, honey? Oh, I'm supposed to go like this, right? Tonight, right now, it's the first time since the moment he was born that I have not held him in my arms for a full day. It's the first night that I haven't been able to say the Shema with him. And as we get into the discussion of language and we get into the discussion of sacrifice, that'll come into play. My other 2 kids, my big kids, Noah on the right and Uriel on the left. Noah is going into first grade tomorrow, and Uriel is going into kindergarten tomorrow. And everything we do for them. We do because of them. And they remind us what's right and what's wrong. All we have to do is watch them. I'm going to show you this slide. I'm not going to go through it right now. I just wanted everyone to see it at the beginning because we're going to focus on this at the end. I'm going to try and make sure that everybody leaves here tonight, and everybody watching at home will be able to have a second to jot this down. The 5 ways you can stand, every one of us can stand with Israel, can stand with Hashem, can stand with the Torah, can stand with our conscience 24 hours a day, every day of the year. And there are 5 simple ways. Here comes the preaching. God is talking, always. Question is, are we listening? Did I say you? I think I said we. Are we listening? Everything that we learn, everything that we do, can be connected as you so, I guess, ably learn on a regular basis because you're part of a very special community. A community that recognizes that the letters of the word are just as important as the concepts. And translations are really mistranslations because they take things out of context. So let's take a few minutes and look at a few examples where all we have to do is look. And I was sitting with my son, with Natan, a few nights ago, and I was looking at him, and I was saying to myself, yeah, this is by chance. This is just, there was a poof, fluke in the cosmos, and lo and behold, earth and animals and man and thinking and this amazing being, this child that I'm holding in my hand, it's all by chance. Yeah, right. Whoever believes, I don't know. I don't want to get into whoever can't just see it because that's why Jews have long noses, because I shouldn't say that on TV, but that's, So the bottom item here, you all, I just heard, are buying your lulavim and your etrogim and you're going to celebrate Sukkot, which is pretty amazing. What do we do on Sukkot? We, the Jewish people, we, the children of Aaron, the high priest. As you know, my name is Cohen. That's the family I come from. What do we do on Sukkot? What do we do during the holiday? Well, we bring 70 sacrifices to honor and to ask God to bless the 70 nations. Of course, we're an apartheid nation, and we don't talk about other people, and we don't. But let's not go there. We're talking about where to go. Okay, there it is. Now, what happened when Joshua came into the land? What did God promise to give the children of Abraham? The land of what? The land of 7 nations. The Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. There was an 8th nation, the Girgashites, but they took off to Africa before this happened. And guess what? 70 nations, 7 is 10%. You're basically talking about God's tithing. God took from his nations, the 70 nations of the world, 7, and said, I'm going to give my people that. The beginning of a conversation. It's the beginning of a conversation. Now, let's look at Deuteronomy 25, 17, 18. I could do an entire semester on this one slide. But again, we're just getting a taste. Amalek, that nation that came from behind, and they didn't come face to face and fight. They went and they picked off the weak from behind. You know that every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has it's called in Hebrew mishgal zguli, a weight, a certain atomic weight. An aleph is 1, a bet is 2, and so on and so forth. And things can be learned if we look at the actual letters in Hebrew and try to figure out what is God trying to tell us. Well, it's interesting that Amalek just by coincidence, happenstance, and in a haphazard way. Of course, there's no providence in this world, there's no design, everything is by chance. So just by chance, this just happened. Just happened. That Amalek equals 240, which is also the same thing as safek, which is doubt in Hebrew. Amalek equals doubt. So we have Amalek in each and every one of us. We have Amalek inside us. Do we, as Joel Osteen says, when we take a tomato and we want to put it, do we put it back with the other tomatoes or do we put it back with the cucumbers and make somebody do some extra work? Let's look at another example. A relative of Amalek, Haman. Versus Mordechai. In this corner. Wow. Again, just by chance, the story goes, at a particular point in time, the queen Vashti, and we're not going to get into what her name actually represents, because we don't have time for that, but she just suddenly becomes modest, and she doesn't want to come out. And Esther becomes queen. Mordechai overhears the plot, and he understands, as we'll see later, the number of dialects in Persia. He happens to understand the right dialect in order to understand the plot, and so on and so forth. You all know the story. This is all by chance, happens to fall into place. And the Hebrew alphabet happens to fall into place to teach us certain things and to tell us certain things about nature and about God and about where we are. Well, numbers also come by chance. In the year 1948, in God's time, which means from the creation of the earth, a man by the name of Abraham is born. And this Abraham happens to live in a place full of idolatry, and he looks up and he says, you know what? I don't buy it. Today it's called a Yiddish kop, a Jewish mind. But he just didn't buy it, and he started looking for a solution. He started looking for a better answer. And we know what that answer ultimately became. That's why we're all here. Well, in 1948, according to the human calendar, or the Gregorian calendar, or Christian calendar, or any other way you want to call it, well, something interesting happens. Israel is reborn. And one of the things that we find is that God and man have to be in partnership in order for everything to work. What happened when the first tablets were given? The first tablets were written with God's finger. He doesn't have a finger, but that's the metaphor. Moses got the tablets, and when you looked at it from the right side, and you looked at it from the left side, and looked at it from the front, and you looked at them from the back, you saw the letters correctly. No human being could do that. The second tablets, Moses had to carve himself. Word of God, but Moses had to do the carving. A partnership had to be created, because otherwise things just won't work. So, in that partnership, we look at the number 22, honor, 26, honor, kabed, honor your father and thy mother. And what does kabed equal? Unfortunately, this slide is cut off, but kabed equals Hashem. It's the same number. What? So you need the partnership. The kabed et avicha v'et imecha. A man, a woman, and God have to come together in order to create a child. But that's just by chance. Now I'm going to tell you one that is much more modern. I'm sitting in my mother-in-law's sukkah. It's probably 2 years ago now. And my wife comes running, Gilad Shalit is being released. Have you seen this? If you've seen this, then I'll skip it. No? Gilad Shalit is going to be released. With what I do in the army, I don't take anything for granted. I said to her, when I see his mother hug him, I'll believe he's home. Well, I continued to go through the morning prayers. I confess, I didn't go to minyan, I didn't go to synagogue that morning. And at the end of the prayer, as you know, there is a pre-prescribed psalm, Tehillim, for every day of the year. And on that day, we read Psalm 60. Psalm 60. Anybody here have a Bible? Well, it's a good book, by the way. You should read it. In the version that I have, every psalm begins with Shir HaMa'alot or Shir LeDavid. There's an instruction to the conductor to explain. And that's in many, many Bibles that are being used is not in there, and therefore there's a little discrepancy in the verses. So in the version that I hold in my hand, the traditional Jewish version, in Psalm 60, I'm reading the psalm, and it says, God spoke in His holiness that I would exalt, that I would divide Shechem, place that we know, and mete out the valley of Sukkot. Gilead is mine. Menashe is mine. Ephraim. Wait a minute. What did I just read? Gilad li Gilad. Gilad is mine, is for me. When? On Sukkot. Whoa. Whoa. Okay. And then I say to my wife, what did they say on the news? And she explained to me what the deal was. And I said, you know what? It's not a good idea, but I just read this. And then she says to me, and you know what? What else I just noticed? I said, what? She said, I was preparing for the new holiday, and in Genesis 42:6, what does God call Joseph? Yosef hu hashalit. Joseph is the viceroy, but in Hebrew it's shalit. Okay, Joseph, Sukkot. What day is today? On every day of Sukkot, we welcome one of the patriarchs and one of the matriarchs into our Sukkah. On the first day, we invite Abraham. On the second day, we invite Isaac. On the third day, we invite Jacob. And this happened to be the fourth day of Sukkot, the day we welcome Joseph into our Sukkah. Joseph hu hashalit. All of the hints are there, whether I like the deal or don't like the deal, whether I think it's a good idea or not a good idea. Somehow, some way, in this text, God just said it straight out. We just have to be willing to put the puzzle together, because it wouldn't be fun for Him if He just gave it to us straight out. What's the point? A few years earlier, two very horrible incidences happened. One of which, there were two helicopters flying into Lebanon on a security mission carrying 125 soldiers, 137 soldiers, I'm sorry. 137 soldiers. And the two helicopters collided, and they fell in northern Israel on a town called Sha'ar Yeshuv. Sha'ar Yeshuv. That week, we read Isaiah chapter 7, and what does Isaiah chapter 7 tell us? Isaiah chapter 7 tells us that a person by the name of, here it is, person by the name of Achaz, the son of Yotam, is fighting in the war against Jerusalem. And it's in the area of Ephraim, which is northern Israel. And in verse 13 he says, "Hear now, house of David. The capital of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. Ephraim will cease to be a people, and in the capital of Ephraim is Samaria, and this head of Samaria is Ramaliah." Okay, doesn't mean very much. But then he says, "Go out and meet Achaz." God says to Isaiah, "Go out and meet Achaz, you and your son, She'ar Yeshuv," which means in English, a remainder will return, "at the edge of the channel of the upper pool, at the road of the launderer's field, and say to him, be calm and be still. Fear not. Let your heart not grow faint before these two smoldering spent firebrands." Sha'ar Yeshuv is the only place, this is the only place in the Bible where Sha'ar Yeshuv is mentioned. Sha'ar Yeshuv was the place where the helicopters fell. They fell on a Friday night, and the secular, non-Bible reading residents of Sha'ar Yeshuv described to the television cameras 2 plumes of burning smoke. When have you ever heard of anybody describe smoke as burning? Yeah, fire makes smoke. 2 plumes of burning smoke. It's not that we take that incident and go searching in the Bible for a reference. That's what we were reading that day. We were reading this that day. We can't tell the future with this. But if we fail to read the present and see that God is talking to us, and we may not be able to understand the messages, but He's talking to us. And we come now to the Atbash Code. The Atbash Code was discovered probably, I don't know if it was discovered, it probably was given down from Moses to Moses. But it was written down for the first time about 1,800 years ago. And this is where your knowledge of the letters becomes very important. Because here we are going to see everything we talked about come together. I gave you a few little tidbits from here and there, just a taste of how this is played. And the Atbash Code gives you proof positive that God and man have to work together in order for the plan to work, and that what is happening today is preordained in the DNA of creation. How does this work? Aleph and Taf. You recognize those 2 letters, right? Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. Taf is the last letter of the alphabet. So it's like a children's code. Bet and Shin, the second letter of the alphabet, and the next to last letter of the alphabet. Okay? It's a very simple code, if you're willing to see it. We talked about the holiday of Sukkot, how we bring sacrifices and ask God to pray for all the nations. But on the 8th day of Sukkot, it's no longer Sukkot. The 8th day of Sukkot is called Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of, I think the word is stoppage. Why? Because God is saying to his people Israel, you just spent a whole week, and we all know that 7 is nature. Everything 7 is nature. 6 days of creation, 7th day of rest. So anything that has to do with the 8th is beyond nature. So 6 days of creation, 7th day of rest, 6 days of Passover, 6 days of Sukkot, 7th day of Sukkot. What is the 8th day? The 8th day, he says, let's just stick around one more day. Stop. Don't go anywhere. Stay one more day so we could celebrate us, just the family. Just the close family. Because we've already prayed for all the other parts of the family on earth. So the Atbash code shows us that whatever day, the first day of Sukkot falls on, Tish'a B'Av, the 9th of Av, the day that we mourn the destruction of the temples, will fall on that same day. Let's say it's a Tuesday. If Aleph Sukkot falls on Tuesday, then Taf, Tish'a B'Av, will fall on a Tuesday that year. Now, was Tish'a B'Av in the Bible? Was Tish'a B'Av created by Moses? Is Tish'a B'Av in this entire story until we get to the destruction? But it's in the code, as you'll see. Bet, Shin, Shavuot, Pentecost. Easy one. So if the second day is on Tuesday, Shavuot will be on Tuesday. Gimel, Reish, Rosh Hashanah. Oops, slipped a little bit. Daled is Kuf, Kriyat Torah, which is Simchat Torah in the diaspora. It's a whole complicated, I'm not going to get into it. And the Hey is Tzadik for Tzom, which is Yom Kippur. And the Vav is Purim last year. Last Purim. So, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey, and Vav all have corresponding holidays that he was able to find when he figured out this code. But what about the 7th day? He doesn't talk about the 7th day. And I'm sorry but it's probably going to come out a little bit messed up when I click on the 7th day. What does Zayin correspond to? Ayin. Is there any holiday that starts with an Ayin? Well, you could say Atzeret, which is another word for Shmini Atzeret, but that's not what it is. And then in 1948, a clerk in Great Britain, low-level clerk, decides that on May 15th, the Union Jack will come down. It was a technical decision. The decision to leave had been made. But the technical decision about when wasn't really important. So it was left to a clerk to do. And he decided on May 15th. Yeah, he decided by chance. So David Ben-Gurion, respecting his religious colleagues or his observant colleagues, his Torah-keeping colleagues, decided to declare the state on Friday to come into effect on midnight on Shabbat. That's why President Truman recognizes Israel at 6:11 Washington, D.C. time, which was midnight and 11 minutes in Israel. So the clerk does this completely by chance, right? Your expectation now is you all know that the Zayin, Ayin, equals Atzmaut, which is independence. Independence Day. Israel Independence Day. Hey ER, Tafshin Chet. The 14th of May, 1948, falls on the same day as the 7th day of Passover that year and every year. in the codified DNA of creation. How do we determine when the holiday starts, when the month starts? 2 witnesses have to come and say, I saw the moon, I saw the stars. And they have to be kosher witnesses. And in modern times, how do we do it? We have a calendar. So the people knew back then, when they were putting together the calendar in the year 20, 30, 40, 50, whenever it was that they decided to codify the calendar, they knew that on May 14th, 1948, Israel would be reborn. They knew, yeah, right. Again, completely by chance. And 19 years later, we come full circle. On the second day of Sukkot, corresponding to the Shin, another holiday is created, Yom Shichrur Yerushalayim. Again, a decision that was made based on biblical. They sat there, Moshe Dayan with his patch, sat together with Ben Gurion. They said, okay, let's look at the Bible and figure out what day we're going to attack the Egyptians, and what is the United Nations going to say, and how fast are we going to win, and when are we going to take Jerusalem? That's how they did it, right? Right. The finger of God from the day of creation. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbat, has in that code the creation of the state of Israel and the return of the Jewish people to Jerusalem. I'm going to conclude with a little bit of Maimonides. I know your teacher here loves Rambam. So I'm going to conclude the preaching part with the 8 levels of giving charity according to Maimonides. Why 8 levels? Because 7 is natural. The word sacrifice in Hebrew is korban. Korban. The root of korban is karev. A sacrifice is not something that we give up. A sacrifice is something that's supposed to make us come closer. My mother says that a marriage is not 50-50. A marriage is always 100% and 100%. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Each one has to sacrifice 100% in order for us to be closer. So again, the translation into English loses all of the meaning of the word korban, which is lekarev, to bring closer. And therefore, Maimonides looked at 8 levels because he wanted to say that charity, although we all believe it's important and we all do it, is still not a natural thing. It's still something that is above nature. And I'm sure you've heard the 8 levels. The 8 levels start from a person who gives, but he gives it unwillingly. He gives it because he has to give it. The 7th level is somebody who gives, but gives it willingly. The 6th level is giving something to a needy person, but only after you've been asked. The 5th level is giving something directly to a needy person, but without them asking. The 4th level is when you give something to somebody, but you don't know who it is. And that's what these charitable organizations, you see all of these, the Jewish National Fund and the Jewish Philanthropies and the United Way and what's it called? Christmas Purse, all of these. That's the concept behind those organizations. It's not that we could do more together, which we can, but it is a higher level of charity when you don't know who it is that you're giving it to. And that's the organizations do that for you. The 3rd level is when the donor knows who it's going to, but the recipient doesn't know who sent it to them. The 2nd level is when all parties are anonymous. That's the 2nd highest level. The highest level of charity, that 8, that above nature, is when we give somebody a job. We give somebody a loan. We give somebody a business loan. We help them create a new business. We don't buy them the fish. We give them a fishing rod and we teach them how to use it. Or even better, we help them get a loan to buy the pond. That's the highest level. Because what is that? It's the highest level of sacrifice. We're coming together and doing something because now, if he's working in my company, I want that person to succeed because my company is involved. If I'm giving them a loan, I want them to succeed because we're partners now and I want my loan back. If I'm helping them buy something, I also am going to probably buy stock in that company and I want that company to succeed. So that has nothing to do with giving away anything. We're not giving away anything. And that's what Maimonides considered to be, the Rambam considers to be the highest level of charity. Politics. I want to talk for a few minutes about the word narrative. Perceptions, reality, Palestine, Israel, Iran, Syria, United States, apartheid, European Union, United Nations. Everybody comes to a story, everybody comes with a narrative. We just went through a list of narratives that one could argue with or not argue with. This is how God sees the world. Or maybe this way. This is the way he sees Israel. Maybe it's this way. I'm not 100% sure. If you know Israel, then this is the Sea of Galilee. This is north up here. So he either sees it this way or from the side. I can't tell. I don't know. But this is the way it appears on a map, or at least it should appear on a map, this way. The countries we're dealing with in the Middle East are way more complex than our maps and our leaders will have us believe. This is Iraq. In Iraq this is Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, the media will give you a picture and say, this is Afghanistan. It won't have all these colors. Look at the number of ethnic groups that are just delineated here. This is just a gross exaggeration and oversimplification. Pashtuns and Tajiks and Uzbeks and Turkmen and so on and so forth. This is the actual tribal map of Afghanistan. This is all the tribes in Afghanistan. Over 168 different tribes. And yes, they come together, they make a country called Afghanistan, and they expect everybody to sing Kumbaya together. It's not going to happen. There are blood rivalries that have been going on for decades and generations, and it's a very complex system that I don't have the time to go into. But we have to realize that it's way more complicated than what we're being told. Iraq. This is the way the media projects Iraq. What does Iraq really look like? Well, if we look at languages, this is what Iraq looks like. Speak at least 10 different languages. If we look at ethnicities or ethnic groups or tribes, again, several dozen different breakdowns. Each one of these deserves self-determination or independent state, or any way you want to look at it, that's what they want. And again, a gross exaggeration, just look at the religious breakdown in Iraq. You could see that there are certain sections that are pushed in one direction or another, and you could see that trying to shove all these people into one country makes it very difficult for one administration to actually control the whole thing. Do you think Persia is any different? Just because we've heard Persian over and over and over again, remember the story with Haman and Mordecai? Well, he happened to understand the dialect, just happened to understand the right dialect, because how many different countries were in Persia at the time? It's in the first sentence of the book. Sheva shloshim u'mea medina. 137 nations. That number 137 is very significant, but that's for another day. Syria. That's the big news today. Does Syria look like this? Is Syria one united piece? There are Shiites that are fighting against Sunnis, and all we have to do is bomb the right people? Or all we have to do is unite with the right people and everything will be fine? This is a better look at Syria. Vast majority of Syria is simply desert that nobody lives in. It's impossible to live here. But along the coast, we have Sunnis and Awalis and Kurds and Christians and Druze and so on and so forth. The same thing continues into Lebanon. And if you're a Syrian, Jerusalem is here. If you're a Syrian, all of this is Syria. All of it is southern Syria. As you can see from this Syrian map, Asham is another word for Syria. You've heard of Shem, Semites? Asham, the land of Shem. All of that belongs to Syria. Gaza down here, El Arish over here, Nablus. Jerusalem isn't on this map because it's called Al-Quds here. So, before you get to the questions, can we win this war? It's a good question. It's a good question, but let's break it down a little bit. A new network was launched in America a few days ago, Al Jazeera America. Many people will believe that what you see in Al Jazeera America is the same benign broadcasting that you see in Al Jazeera World or Al Jazeera in Arabic. Truth is that although they have the same name and they come from the same country, they're completely different networks. They run differently, different news, different sources. When Al Jazeera began, each one of the countries in the area had an iron-fisted tyrant running it. You know, Bibi Netanyahu, for example, an iron-fisted tyrant running one of the countries in the area. Or Arik Sharon, or Shamir, all of these really anti-American troublemakers were running. Shimon Peres once in a while, on and off. But this Al Jazeera network started to come into the homes. And all day long they were fomenting, your leaders are corrupt, your leaders are corrupt, your leaders are corrupt. And they created basically this huge gas bubble over the course of a whole decade, which Professor Moti Kedar describes as all it needed was a spark. And somebody gave it an actual physical spark. Somebody in Libya set himself on fire. And boom, Omar Gaddafi falls. Algeria falls. And then it starts going to Yemen, and northern Ethiopia, and Kuwait, and Qatar, and Oman, and then Egypt, and now Syria. Lebanon is already gone. Lebanon is already a part of Iran. And next comes Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all of America's friends in the area. Al Jazeera did a tremendously good job of preparing the ground for the upheaval of these leaders. What we failed to do is recognize that when we're talking about an Arab Spring, maybe some of those people involved at the beginning really wanted true democracy, really wanted a true open society, maybe. But we didn't come to their aid. We didn't do anything. And they were quickly swept aside. So let's define the terms of the question. Can we win this war? Well, the question is what can means. Does it mean can? May? Do we want to win this war? Do we plan to win this war? Is it a war? Not necessarily. Who's we? Is the we United States, the U.S. Congress, the United States White House, NATO, the United Nations, the quartet that was put together in order to bring Israel to its knees, the global coalition that's being put together, that was put together to get Iraq out of Kuwait, or again is being put together today? What does win mean? What does a win look like in the modern day? Are we in it to win? And finally, is this really a war? Let's look at that last word, war. Until the modern day, until World War I, World War II, wars were fought basically over religion and over space, land. And then they took a break for a couple years, and people began fighting for freedom, supposedly. The old war was a war. Whoever won the war sat down with the loser and talked about the terms of surrender and the terms of either rebuilding or the terms of not rebuilding. The new war, basically, there's a lot of talk going on. Talk. But there's very little deciding that there's going to be a winner and a loser here. In the old war, you had uniforms and battle lines. Here come the Reds. Everybody knew these are even in the rules of war that were put together in Geneva. You must wear your colors. How many movies have we all seen or cowboy on TV where the guy gets down in his last breath to pick up the flag to show his colors? The bugle boy was willing to die to keep the flag up. Today, you fire from a mosque, you fire from a hospital, and you use that as what are called human shields. You put children out in front and you shoot through them. And I could give you a multitude of examples. The old war followed the Geneva Conventions. The new war, the West follows the Geneva Conventions, and the West's enemies don't. The old war was controlled by governments. The new war is fought by proxies of governments. Do you think the United States doesn't have proxies in all of these places? Of course, we spend a lot of our money on that. A lot of our taxes go to that, to all different kinds of proxies to try and win the war without U.S. involvement. What do they say? This guy is thankfully out of office, and a moderate has replaced him. This is a war against the Saturday people first and the Sunday people next. The little Satan, Israel and the Jews. The big Satan, the part of the world that Islam has not yet conquered, United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, and so on. But jihad comes in several stages. Remember Al Jazeera. Look at what happens on the college campuses. Look at what happens in the stock market. Look at what happens with the oil. Jihad comes in several stages. By the pen, college, Al Jazeera, newspapers, CNN. By finances, investment in the stock market, endowing college chairs in all kinds of different places of the country. And finally, when you've weakened that country's mind and that country's pocket, it's easy to beat them with the sword, but that only comes later. President Kennedy the last president to really define victory. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Do we live up to that ideal today? It's a question. It's a big question. So like we did at the start, I beseech you, when you see a soldier, when you see somebody that is providing us this service, police officer, border guard, soldier, firefighter, EMS worker, nurse, doctor, teacher, say thank you. Say thank you. You can't imagine how far a thank you can go. We walked out of the hospital 15 weeks ago with tons of stuff that nobody else walked out of the hospital with because my wife says thank you. And all the nurses were fighting over who would get her the next night because she said thank you. This is my nephew Aviad, who is a paratrooper. This is our nephew Mayor, who just finished officers training school. And this is our wedding in Jerusalem 3 years ago. We started out with the prayer for soldiers and for those who serve. And I'd like to conclude this part before I teach you the 5 and we go to the questions with this prayer that finds its roots already in biblical times and has a really interesting history, and I think you may want to pick up on it one day and teach the origins of this prayer because it's and how it's changed over the course of the decades and the eons. And basically it's a request from the King of Kings and the King to hold dominions, to bless the President, to bless the Vice President, to bless the Governor of this great state, to bless the Deputy Governor of this great state, all the constituted officers of government, and to ask the King who reigns over all kings with his mercy to sustain them and protect them and rescue them and put into their heart, into the heart of all their counselors, compassion to be good with us. So what are the 5 ways that you could stand with Israel? What are the 5 ways you could stand with Hashem? What are the 5 ways you could stand with what you really believe inside on a daily basis, every day? And it's pretty much a cycle. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It starts from the top and it goes to the bottom because it's a constant cycle. Where do we learn the cycle from day 1? Where is it? Can anybody read this word? Can't hear you. Lev. What does lev mean? Heart. What is the last word? The last word in the 5 books of Moses? Israel. Ends with a lamed. What is the first word in the 5 books of Moses? In. Starts with an I. No. Bereshit. Beginning. As long as that cycle continues, it is a living organism without a beginning and without an end. It's a lev, it's a heart. The blood can flow through it. Interesting thing is that if you turn it around in the other direction, it's a lot like one of those records where they say if you play them backwards, you get. If you go backwards, it's Baal. It's pretty interesting. But that's just by chance. And again, if you're reading the Bible in English, it starts with an I, which is be, in me, which is fine too. But it could be anything in me. It's not that crucial aspect of a heart. The first thing every one of us could do, every day of the year, no matter where we are, as it says in the Shema, when you're walking, when you're standing, when you wake up, when you go, and sometimes I just open and I start teaching all of the various different blessings. Amazing number. Between the rainbows and Mount Rainier and getting past the border without being stopped and having the guy actually smile and say, welcome home, which was So praise and prayer, we could do that all the time. And I'm sure that you have the guide to prayers. My wife's favorite prayer with our son. For the first 2 months of his life, we had 8 to 10 poopy diapers a day. And then he stopped. Now, I've had a problem, because over the last couple of years, quite a few years, I've had this thing. I've said to people, well, if we stop celebrating it, they'll stop doing it, and then we don't have to clean it all the time, because they want to please us. But it became serious when the kid stopped. And we were doing everything we possibly could. She was eating all kinds of special foods, and she started drinking non-alcoholic beer, which she doesn't like. She doesn't like the alcoholic kind either, but she was drinking beer and fenugreek, and everybody was giving us their grandmother's remedy. And then he started going on a regular basis finally after a few weeks of giving us, little trepidation. This should be the biggest problem, as we say in the Jewish world. This should be the biggest problem of his life. The fact that he didn't dirty his diaper for a few weeks. But our favorite prayer now is Asher Yatzar, the prayer you say after he comes. So every time we change his diaper, we say Asher Yatzar with him now, because it has significant meaning. It has significant meaning because for a few weeks that was the top priority in our house. We were sending out a daily poo watch to the parents and grandparents in Israel, and when we didn't send out one day, my mother complained. Knowledge. The people watching and the people in this room, I'm preaching to the choir. But there's always some moment, there's always an opportunity for us to learn more. The reason I have all these pieces of paper, because, my mother asked me why I don't read novels. I don't read novels because if I start reading stuff that then I won't be reading things that are important or interesting or I said, when I know everything there is in God's world, then I'll read a novel. To those who are watching, who are not in this room, get yourself into a good Bible-based church. This is a great one. There's probably one in your neighborhood as well that you can go to on a regular basis as well. And take the opportunity. Don't believe a word I say. Triangulate everything. Find good sources of information. Find good sources of... Your website has really good sources. Most of the good sources. And there are a couple sources that are considered to be good that aren't. And I'll help and share with that as well. But look for good sources of information. Don't believe anything anybody says. Just because they look like they know how to talk doesn't mean they know anything. Family. In family, I include community organizations. Organizations like Christians United for Israel, which everybody here knows about, and those who are interested in politics are involved with. In the Jewish community, we have Jewish federations, the United Way, women's organizations. Again, in the Jewish world, it's Hadassah Women, or Amit, or Emunah. If you keep the Shabbat, then you want to have Jewish background, Jewish involvement. There are fraternal organizations. Find organizations that do good, and do good with them. Because as we heard from Maimonides, one of the highest levels is doing that good as a group with the people that you're giving to and the people that are getting, nobody knows. You don't know each other. You don't know about it. Finances, investment, love offerings. I don't have to talk to you about that because you have a system here that introduces you to plenty of opportunity, and you choose the opportunities that are right for you. I'm now working with an organization that I can't talk much about because we're on camera, off camera, after, if you want to sit down in the corner, and I'll tell you a little bit more. It's run by a woman by the name of Gal Lusky. You want to Google this woman. Rabbi Google is a good source for this. Gal, G-A-L, and her last name is Lusky, L-U-S-K-I. I or Y. It's spelled differently in different places. She runs an organization called Israel Flying Aid. Israel Flying Aid only provides humanitarian assistance in countries that do not have diplomatic relations with Israel. She's a fascinating woman, and right now she's been in a very dangerous place just to the northeast of Israel. It's actually technically directly north because it's crooked, but on your map it's northeast of Israel. Just to make it a little clearer, it's above Jordan and to the right of Lebanon. And she's been doing tremendous work there, bringing comfort, food, help to Christians, Druze, Muslims, doesn't matter, and trying to help them not become refugees. I have videotape and all kinds of things I could show you afterwards that show her organization and show the difference between what she does and what the United Nations do. And anything that's going to be coming in tonight will be shared with her organization. So that is that's on that level. But on a more important level, I don't know if more important, but on a daily level, where do you get your gas? Do you get the gas at the cheapest station in town because you want to have more money to tithe or you want to have more money to do good with? Well, sometimes the cheapest station in town is passing on their tithes to people who want to blow you up. So sometimes we have to take a look where we're buying our gas. It might be worth paying an extra 2-3 cents a gallon. I'm back in the United States, right? It's gallons again? Okay. And there are 2 lines through the S here. Okay. So where we get our gas can impact our daily lives. We all have investment portfolios. Thank God we live in a world where we're able to play in this thing where previous generations it was only the robber barons. We all have investments of one shape or another because we all have IRAs and we have tax-deductible investments or 401k or something. Everybody has something put away somewhere. Where's that money invested? Have you checked to make sure that the money that you're investing is not invested in companies that support terrorism, that are firing on our boys and girls in Iraq or Afghanistan or any place else in the world? There are organizations today that will check your portfolio for you at no cost, and they'll make sure that you have a terror-free portfolio. Another aspect of investment, other than investing in the good works that you do, is, I believe, companies that other people want to boycott. There's a company that's tomorrow, what day is today? Monday? No, Wednesday, 2 days from now, going to ring the bell on the NASDAQ. And I'm hoping that somebody will take a picture of it. And it's a company called Oramed. The symbol is ORMP. Oramed Pharmaceuticals. A woman from Jerusalem, a niece of the great Rabbi Kook, the first chief rabbi in the modern day in the Holy Land, Ashkenazi chief rabbi, there was a Sephardi rabbi before him, has figured out, hopefully, God willing, how to capsulize insulin. So we no longer, those who need insulin will no longer have to have a injection, but will be able to just pop the pill in their mouth. They've just finished the second round of trials, and they're going for the third round of trials now with the FDA. If it goes well, I'll be very happy because of the miracle that it brings to Earth, and also because I invested. But if it does well, I'm going to be upset because I didn't invest enough. So that's another aspect. Look at companies that are doing good in the world. Look at companies. I promote Israel, so I promote Israeli companies who are doing good in the world, and there are oodles of them and plenty of them. So don't just give to Israel, grow with Israel. Grow your portfolio, grow your involvement, grow your friendships, grow your family. And the best way to do that is to do what the former President Bush said. It's called boots on the ground. Boots on the ground is you got to visit. You got to do your pilgrimage. Not to Mecca. You got to do your pilgrimage. And people tell me, rightly so, times are tough, finances are tough, it's a difficult trip because it costs a lot. Well, I was just in Canada, and a plague has reached Canada. Shouldn't call it a plague. A phenomena has reached Canada. It's called Starbucks. And they popped up everywhere. Now, how many of us get our coffee from a Starbucks or a Coffee Bean or one of these companies where we're paying $4, $5, $6 for a cup of coffee? Well, I'll tell you what. If you eliminate 1 cup a week, in 2 years, you've got your trip to Israel. So each and every one of us have something that we do. Maybe we smoke, 1 less pack. Maybe we drink beer, 1 less 6. Well, okay, let's give it a Maybe we have season tickets to the Mariners, so we sell 1 or 2 of the games to somebody else and we take that money and we put it in StubHub or any of the other legal ways of doing that today. So many ways of saying, I'm going to take that jar, and every time I do something that I'm not happy with, I'm putting $1 in the jar. And you'd be surprised how quickly that jar fills up. I've done it myself. I'm not into self-promotion, but last but not least, I want to tell you about Yosef Mazur, and then I'll open it up for the questions. Yosef Mazur is 93 years old, 93 years young. He came to Israel when he was in his late teens, and he's lived there ever since with his sweetheart. She's also 93. Wonderful people, spry of brain, spry of body, and sharp of tongue. And a few years ago, he was sitting with his grandchildren at the table on Friday night, and one of his kids said, it's really, why do you have to exaggerate this whole Holocaust thing? So a few 100,000 Jews were killed. Why do we have to exaggerate the numbers? And he looked at the kid and he said, and this man has seen it all. And he said, where'd you get this? He said, my history teacher in school. So he sat for the next 8 years and researched it. The amount of paper could fill this room twice. The publisher came to me a few years ago and said, we don't know what to do. We can't get this book into it. So I worked with the professor for a good few months, close to a year, and we got the Hebrew edition out. And the day we got the Hebrew edition out, he says, okay, now I want it in English. So we started working on the English edition, and they're much different. In the introduction here, which maybe I'll ask the pastor to post the introduction so that they can read what the book is about. It's not a novel. If you want to understand both sides of the argument and make up your own mind, this is what it's about. It gives you the arguments for different solutions, for different parts of the problem. What we tried to do in this is create a textbook that could also be read and could be studied at the same time. And there's nothing in here that is new. It's just the way it was put together. It's called in psychology the gestalt, or the stream of consciousness is what the professor really brought to the table on this. And no less an individual than Bughi Ya'alon, currently the Minister of Defense, basically said, and he's quoted in the English one, that if I could just get this into the schools in Israel, it would make a difference in people's lives and actually probably save lives. Because he did it in a way that other people just refused to do. And it's now, thankfully, in 4 universities in Israel, is being used as a textbook already. And I think we're up to 14 or 15 campuses here in the United States. So I'm hoping that Kufi on campus and other organizations will choose to pick this up. This copy belongs to your pastor, so you cannot have it. There are some available in the back. We do not take a profit on this. It's $20 a copy. You can go to my website, drmikecohen.info, drmikecohen.info, or go to Amazon. I encourage you to buy it directly because it's a lot cheaper than buying it commercially. Because we just take off the profit and send it to you at cost. I want to again beseech you to take heart with these 5 things: praise and prayer, knowledge. Take every opportunity to read and to learn and to hear. Family, friends, community, organizations, your investments, your love offering, your finances. And finally, pray on getting to Israel. That pilgrimage is like nothing else you've ever done, and it will change your life, and it will change your family's life, and most of the time it's for the better. Okay? Let's do a few questions and then try and put them together. There is the real meaning of any word is only in God's hands. How we figure out how to interpret it fills up volumes, and if you go to a Jewish library, you'll see it's been written about for 3,000 years. People have been writing interpretations, and as you've learned here in other sessions, the levels of pshat, basic understanding of a word, the drash, where we begin to put things together like we've done today, and the sod, and then there's the sod shebesod, which is even deeper. There's, again, 7, 8 levels of understanding. People ask me, can I have a authoritative Jewish translation of the Bible, please? And I say no. And they say, why, are you hiding it? I said, no, because it's impossible. The best I've seen, and unfortunately, there's no Jewish version of it, but the best Christian translation that I've seen is called the Amplified Bible, because it teaches right off the bat that there's more than one possibility for many, many, many of the words and for many of the sentences, and depending on how you read it, it could, where you put the comma or where you put the... Originally, and this is my problem with Vashti, and I'm not going to be able to answer that because it's too long a discussion. I apologize, but it's too long a discussion. There is a theory that originally the whole 5 books were one continuous scroll. No separation between the letters, no comma. Even today we have no commas, we have no... And that's why Rabbi Akiva, who is the line that today's rabbinic Judaism follows, after the destruction there was all kinds of different leaders, and one of the leaders was Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba, that was the military and political leader at the time. And Rabbi Akiva revived the learning, and he was able to teach things from the Kitrek Ktarim Shel Haotiyot, how the design of the letter was written. And that's what I'm going to conclude with in a second. It goes back to Esther, but I'm sorry I can't answer the Vashti, but I'll give you something better. And finally, unfortunately, no, 2 helicopters fall, you're not going to have any survivors. But the interesting thing is, there were 137 soldiers. And where is this found in the Bible? Isaiah 7:13. We don't know. We just don't know. We don't know why or how things happen, but done. Okay. So I'm going to conclude with this. And it connects everything we discussed. I don't have a slide for it, unfortunately. It's one of the prices I have to pay for getting stuck at the border yesterday. If you look at any Hebrew version of the Bible, every one we've been able to find, there is a chilling discovery in the book of Esther that I did not know about until I met my wife a few years ago, and she showed it to me. When God lists in the book of Esther the names of the children of Haman, what does he say? It says the names of the children of Haman, and then it goes to the next scene. Esther comes to the king and says, please hang the 10 children of Haman. But a second ago, one sentence earlier, we just did that. We just killed them. What's this all about? So the first lesson that comes out of that is En mukdam u'muchar b'Torah. There's nothing first, there's nothing last. So anybody who knows anything about literature knows that in a linear book, you can't be in two places at the same time because the letters will go on top of each other and the ink will blot. So you have to tell the story in a linear way. And therefore, the story scene A is taking place outside. Scene B might be taking place inside. Could be at the same time. It could be, she may not know that they just killed them. All kinds of ways of looking at it simply from that perspective. That's the easy way. Other ways looking at it brings us to our criminals of today. In Persia of that time, and in Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, other places today, the highest level of insult to somebody was not killing them, not capital punishment, but it was hanging the dead body. Kill the person first and then hang the dead body out. That was a greater offense. It still is a greater offense in many of the countries. You kill the person first and then hang them. And maybe that's what Esther was talking about. But when you're talking about those 10 names of the children of Haman, there are 4 letters that are not the same size. A taf, a shin, and a zayin. And a vav is larger. People look at it and say, why? And for a millennia, there was no answer. There was no answer. And then in 1947, 11 men are put on trial for their crimes in Europe and in North Africa, I'm sorry. One of them commits suicide in jail, and 10 are sentenced to death and hanging. Not death by hanging, death and hanging. 10 sons of Haman, 10 criminals at the Nuremberg trials, and what brings them together, Taf Shin Zayin, the year equivalent in the Jewish calendar is 1947. In the book of Esther, that we have all read, that we all know, is coded. God put it in. We couldn't understand why those letters were always codified small. Every scribe, it doesn't matter if you were in Yemen or Morocco or in Hungary or Poland, every Jewish scribe received that those letters are supposed to be small. One of the great miracles is that no matter where you were in the diaspora, they all came out the same at the end. So I urge you, we should all listen. Don't try to be arrogant and say, I could tell the future because I read this or that or the other thing. I know this is going to happen next week. I know this is going to happen next month. Yeah, all of these great professors who have studied the Soviet Union for decades and wrote miles upon miles upon miles and destroyed hundreds of thousands of forests with their books about the former Soviet Union. Not one of them predicted it fall. Not one. So let's not be arrogant about our knowledge, but let's not also be stupid, and let's not force ourselves not to listen when the evidence is right in front of us. And I wish you all a wonderful year 5774. Hatash Ad. Ad being forever. Ad being Ed, witness. It's going to be an interesting year. It'll be an eventful year. And God willing, we will all be inscribed in the books of life, in the books of peace. And we will find a way to get ourselves out of the messes that we found ourselves in, whether they're personal, communal, or international. And with God's help, we'll meet again before you buy your Lulav miniature game for next year. Shana Tova.
All right. You are dismissed. Know that he has just a handful of books back there. Would you give us your website one more time where they can turn his mic on for just a second. Announce your website again for people live streaming.
Dr Mike Cohen.info. DrMikeCohen.info. Or just go to Rabbi Google, put in Mike Cohen IDF or Mike Cohen Israel IDF, and I'll pop up there a whole bunch of times.
Thank you for studying with us today. If you have any questions regarding the material discussed, please contact me at my email address. It's pastormark@elshaddaiministries.us. Be blessed and shalom.